I had some question about how do I heal myself when I have something that is not going well in my body. This is a long story because it started since very, very, very long time. I learned through illness and disease in my body because I was curious and wondering, like if I knew that it was a connection with my body and another level. I had some experiences, and one that was quite hard, psychological, difficult, and immediately my body responded. It was in 1981. So I saw the connection and I understood that I was not pregnant outside of the uterus. I understood that my body reacted violently to something that happened at another level than physical. And this was the start for me to look for something else, to look for another understanding, another way of healing. And like by chance, when you look for, it's when like you ask for, things are coming. You have to think about asking what is dear to you. You have to think about wondering. And me, I was like, wow, this is really amazing. There is a direct connection. So now I know that nothing is wrong. And I declined at the hospital. I signed a paper because they wanted to keep me and open my stomach and keep me 3 weeks. And I knew I don't have anything, so I signed a discharge to release. And this was in Corsica. It was the end of my vacation. And I was going back to Paris, where I was living, a suburb of Paris at that time. So when I arrived, I had so much pain in my stomach. It was very, very hard, but I really knew deep inside of him something was not wrong, because I knew it was a connection with the event and the response of my body. So I was trusting that process. But I'm not thinking, okay, it's going to stay like that. It's not because I was scared that I've been to the doctor. It's just because I wanted to have proper examination to be sure that everything was okay in my uterus and all that. So I went to see the family doctor when I arrived in the suburb of Paris, and I told him the situation. And he said, okay, we're going to do hysterography, we're going to do all the examination, blood examination, everything, to see if everything is okay or if there is something. So he gave me the prescriptions, and he brought me back to the door to say bye-bye. He closed the door, and suddenly he reopened it. He looked at me straight in the eyes and told me, by any chance, don't have a psychological shock? I was like naked. I was so embarrassed because I didn't want to say that what happened. And I was discovered, in fact. And this was a validation, in a way, of my deep feeling and my knowledge inside that everything was fine. And I think I was carrying this situation that I went through in my aura, and it was in empathy and able to feel that something was at another level. I did the examination for the uterus and blood and everything. I found absolutely nothing. Since that time, I understood also that every time I was going to see a doctor for a cold, for something, sinusite, I had a lot of sinusitis and things like that, pain in my neck, all these pains. And I understood that in fact, I was going to see a doctor, to have someone bringing some attention to me, because when I was little girl, as some maybe of you knows, I was not with my parents, and in a way I was projecting on the doctor the image of the father, of the parents, to take care of me. So I was like, in a way, always sick, but it was not really big sickness, to go there and to have someone taking care of me. After this, when I had the validation that I had nothing wrong in my body and I put everything together, I had this insight, and this changed totally my life. I decided to find other ways to be cured. It was no internet at that time, but like by chance, I met people who were healing in different ways. And it was the time I moved also to Paris. And like by chance on my path, I met people and I discovered other kind of therapists, like osteopathy, naturopathy, because I was also looking for that inside. I wanted something else. And I started to be really interested in all this parallel medicine, to the point that I did quite a lot of workshops. In my family and my close friends were thinking I was like ending in a sect, because I did quite some very interesting workshops and about energetic and about sound and about colors, symbols. I follow classes for many years because I'm passionate about that. And it was fantastic. I discovered so many things, and more I had the validation that something was totally connected with what happened in my body, and something at another level. So I did this. It has been like many years of that. I did not arrive like I am today in one day to the other. It's all by these experiences that I had in my body, and they are precious. And I had terrible pain in my body, really hard. In 1989, I had the beginning of cancer of the colon of the uterus. And it was quite interesting because I divorced in 1988 from my first husband, and I was alone, and I was in love with a man that in fact was showing me something of myself I was unable to see, that I had to integrate and to awake. In fact, simply the photographer. He was a photographer. But I pursued myself. I was in love of him, and I wanted to do my life with him, because for me, being in couple was everything. To the point that 1989, I go to see my gynecologist, and for my yearly examination, everything was fine. And a couple of months after, I had no pain, but something was like telling me something was not right down there. So I called her and I said, I don't have pain, but I have something that is not right. She said, I just saw you, everything is fine. I said, I don't know, something is not right. I don't know what it is. I don't have pain, I don't have signs, but I feel it. So she said, come. So I did. She did the examination again, and she called me, because it was by phone at that time. And she said, you have to come and we have to do, it's a severe dysplasia of the beginning entrance, the tube of the uterus, and you have to have immediately a laser surgery. I was not scared at all, because as I felt the message from my higher self 2 months before, it started after the examination, I started to have some, and I was in this relation that was not aligned, that was false for me, for my integrity. So what happened is that I had the laser surgery. It was quite the beginning of these things at that time. It was painful. And she told me, now you're going to have 4 years of examination several times a year, with a special test to see if it's gone or if it's coming back. I said, okay. But the day I had the surgery, when I went home, suddenly it was like a fire inside of me, and I understood why this happened. It was not a punition. It was just that I had to face myself, to be honest with myself. What happened is that I persuaded myself I was in love with this man, but in fact it was not that. In fact, it was also the level that he was showing me, mirroring me, the photographer in becoming. That was asleep, that I was not in a way acknowledged inside of myself, because I was doing photography since a long time, but I was not secure enough to go as a photographer level. So this was one thing. But the other thing that this situation was showing me, and it has been really clear when I had the surgery, because I went there with a very positive mindset, saying, okay, we take this off. What do I have to understand about this thing off? What do I have to face and to take off of my way to be? And I understood. I understood that in fact, this man, like I was going to a doctor many years before to have someone taking care of me, this man was taking care of me when I was with him traveling, being assistant. And he was sending me flying ticket, the best palaces hotel and all that. And in fact, I had to face myself that I was simply interested about all these things, luxury that I could not have by myself. And when I faced that, it was a fire inside, and everything came clear. And I understood also, yes, now I know. It shows me I have to become the photographer, but I don't allow me to be. And it has been quite magical. So I knew we're going to do the test for 4 years, but I knew it will be okay. And effectively, we did the test for 4 years, and it was done. Because I was aligned with my integrity, with my truth, with what was right for me. The funny thing is that the situation with this man evolved very well, because I was not playing this unconscious game of wanting things from him by interest. But when he called me again to be assistant, as I was clear with myself, I was assistant, and we became really dear friends to the end of his life. So this is a thing. When there is something in our body, sure, it's very important to have examination. This, it's great, because or you don't feel what can come, what is happening inside of you, and you have to do it, or you feel something, but you don't know what it is, so you have to verify, to test, and to have validation first of your feeling, but also that everything is fine, and if things are not fine, you have to do, what you have to do. So, but you are actor in this situation. You are not a victim and taken by the medical for them to make what they want, because you are already aware about something that is at work. So it's great to have this consciousness, to have this information that when something happens here in the physical, it's because before falling in the physical, in the matter that is a lower vibration, we had signs. We have signs like, for example, in this relation, this man was rejecting me. And me, I was sad, sure. But it was right, because the relation was not right. So we have these signs, but we are unable to see, and we have to find the way to face ourselves, what is right for us or not. Are we doing a compromise? Are we compromising in a situation? Are we expressing what is important for us? This is the first step to do. And also to have in mind, and it could last hours to explain that, because it's more than 40 years of work if I can say work, of research, of discoveries through the body, to have in mind that everything we live, even when we are in utero, everything we live is written in our cells. It's there in our body. We speak a lot about transgenerational. This also is a factor to take in consideration. There are a lot of books about that. But it's not a fatality, because when you face a situation, for example, in transgenerational, there are often issues that repeat from one generation to another one, or jump one generation from the grandparents to the grandchild. And you have repetition of accident or sickness, like by chance, often on the same date or similar time, similar age. You can observe this and be aware of that, and eventually work this with a bioenergetician or someone who is working on testing energies and would gonna see if it affects you and what eventually you can formulate, express, or just simply see that it's a fact that the family secret finally is not so terrible. It was just becoming terrible because it was hidden. And it became like beating, like knocking, to just be known and put in light. So it can be a lot of information about all this, but it's quite fascinating process. So when you have all these informations together, now the complexity is to find practitioners who are used to work on the cell memory. I came on this subject, on this topic also, because someone told me I had a surgery, and I don't know, since I had the surgery, something is wrong with my scar and that. This is another very interesting part of the same process. Scars, when we have a surgery, when we have a cut, when we have an accident, there is a trauma, and the cells memorize these things, and they can block. My acupuncture recently, I had a small, like 2-3 years ago, someone hit me in the back, and I had a small shock, and I was like, in a moment, like floating. But it's exactly what is happening. You are pushed off your subtle bodies, off-centered. And it's like very disturbing for a time, and you think you are fine after, but no. And I was on my way to have a session. He explained to me that when we have this shock, in 1 second or fraction of a second, all the blood of the body is not circulating. And all the organs are not flowing the same way. So it can create disturbance at different parts of the body or organs, because just that little shock, just because everything was not flowing like usually. So all these little things are to take care in consideration, and the best for sure is to have people, practitioners, therapists who are working on the energetic level, because before all we are energy, and our spirit, our way to see, to think, the light we emanate, it's energy. It's not palpable, it's invisible, but it's energy. The body, it's also energy at a lower vibration. So when you have this kind of people who can help you, we can refer to, it's much easier. When I was in Paris, I had naturopath, acupuncture, osteopath, midwife osteopath, working in osteopathy on this. All these people were working on the cell memory, and energetic, bioenergetician, kinesiologists. All these people were working like that. When I arrived in New York, I had nobody. Sure, I was also doing yoga since a long time. So when I arrived in New York and I started to have pain in my legs, in my hips, for different reasons that I discovered later, that I knew because I worked with in symbolism of the body with an osteopath that was my therapist, osteopath, and I learned the correspondence that can be in between part of the body and some situation in my life. Relations or for work or expression, things I was not expressing, or something that was not in balance in my couple, or things that touched the hips. Like by chance my hips were painful when I was in New York. So this thing is, I was alone with that, so I was connecting in a way to their spirit. And by yoga I was directed to do exactly the pose, and my inner self was asking me to do it again and again and again and again and again. And sometimes I was dizzy, making 10 times the same pose, the same thing, to go really in contact with the pain. And like by miracle, suddenly it was tears and the pain was gone. So I know this process since many years. I have some books about that, about psychotherapeuts, psychologists who did relation, body and the psyche and the correspondence of that, and how to work that in yoga and how it's effective in yoga. And I had no network about the people I knew. I was going in France 4 times a year, so I was going to see all these people when I was there to have maintenance, because I was not waiting to have something wrong to go to see these people. I was like preventing and maintaining my well-being, and I learned a lot, because every time I was going, I was learning about the correspondences and why this happened there or there or there. I worked a lot, and I will speak another time about, because people are waiting for this, about the teeth. It's a long story, and it's part of the same process. So one day, my ex-husband was working in a restaurant, and at this restaurant arrived a man, a Frenchman. And like by chance, this man, I met him in Paris several years before. We went with friends at the restaurant, and I had at that time, I was doing also another workshop of metamorphoses with Gaston Saint-Pierre, who is dead now, Canadian, and I did this for several sessions. And he had a little tool, like a tube, that was like to magnetize the water or the wine or any liquid. And I had my little tube everywhere I was going, at the restaurant, everywhere, and people were laughing, thinking I was crazy. And this guy was interested. So he asked me where I bought the tube, and I told him by this man in Canada, and he bought one. I met him only once in a restaurant with friends, but for him it was sounding right. You will not believe, it's the man who came at the restaurant where my ex-husband was working in New York many years after. And they spoke, and they discovered that I was the wife of my husband, and he knew me. So we've been in touch. And we spoke about water, because the purpose was water. And I was also reading the book of this Japanese scientist about water and all that. So we had a tea and a discussion about that. And he told me, you know, I discovered a lot of things after we met, and I bought this little tool about magnetism and energetic. And I thank you for that. And also, I met someone amazing. I say, oh, yeah, where? I say, oh, he's in Paris, and he's doing something that is really interesting, that is bioenergetician, and maybe you should meet him when you go. So I say, okay. So I met this man, and I worked with him since 18 years. So it's the method, the base of his work is method ACTMOS, that you can look online. It's about energetic medicine, quantic medicine, and with time he practiced so much that he developed his own technique, and he can practice at distance. So at the first 2 years when I was in New York, I was going in Paris, I saw him. I saw how he was working with his tools, antenna, and all the different oligo-element, homeopathic, everything, and how my body was responding with the antenna I was holding, like testing, like also in kinesiology, we can do the similar thing. And it was fascinating to me. And finally, he developed a technique to be able to connect to the frequency of people at distance with his antenna, but without the person. So now, since 16 years, he follows me like that. When I have something, I say, you know, can you check that? He does a test. The first test is to see if I am centered. And the amazing thing is that at the beginning, 18 years ago, I needed my body because he was doing the session. And he said, oh, your body is asking another session in 8 weeks. So 8 weeks after, I had the session. And every time we could see when I needed the next session. But it's my body who responded. And I could see when my body responded to with the antenna, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, the antenna was moving. And it was not making the antenna moving. I could feel also. So what happened is that I did this all these years. And now, since some years, I need maybe only one test a year, one recentering a year, and even I'm not very off-center, like at the infinite, like it's possible. Like when you have a very difficult accident or something, you can be totally gone, totally off-centered, and after it's very difficult to face what is coming. Because when you are centered, your energy, your wholeness is able to deal with what is coming. It can be the flu, it can be any kind of thing. When you are centered, your whole being is able to face and to respond, and your body is able to work. So I did this for many years, and I also requested this for my aunt that is old, and he can do this, but he connects with the frequency of the person, and the person answer if it's okay or not to do a testing and a session on the person. So it doesn't do a session if the person doesn't need or don't want, because sometimes there is also the possibility that the person don't want, because she has to be through her own process. So this is really interesting, and for me it has been also a tool to validate more and more my feeling, my intuition about something I want to take or not take, something like something is coming, it's like a big no, and I know it's not right. You know, it's like, I don't know how to explain that, because everybody has different way to experiment that. But it's like something in my plexus like twisted, and I know it's not right. And the plexus, the solar plexus, is the center, astral center of emotions. So, you know, it's a lot about that to discover, and now more and more we are discovering about quantic medicine and bioenergies. If you go online and you put this, you will find a lot of things. For some people it makes sense, for some others it's totally stupid. But the fact is, and the science now is coming on that, is that we are electric beings. So we can have an overload of electric waves, or we can have a shutdown, like when you have too much power and it's shut down to protect the rest. It's what our body is doing as well. And like this, we're obliged to stop, to pause, to rest. And what is nice is when you have someone to help you like that. So you see, there are a lot of things to take in consideration, and to go back to the scare of the body, that you have a surgery, or that you break a bone, or that you have a shock somewhere, or there is a memory attached to that part. Different things. It can be because during the moment you have the incident or the accident, you were in a state of being or mind that was not aligned, and your higher self found a way to make you stop, to think, to interiorize, to go deep inside. A little bit what is going on at the collective level now, but at the individual. So when this happened, because it's the same, if you believe that you have a soul, for me, it's like I came with an experience of life to live like I have to live it. It's not a fatality neither. I have also free will, and I have also choices that I make. They can change the direction of my life. But what is important is to maybe observe the situation before. It can be even sometimes 3 months before something happens, 6 months before. There are cycles. There are also some therapists who are working on cycles to see the repetition. It can be cycles of 10 years, of 15 years, of 3 years. They come, for example, from the first time the thing happened, and when it repeats, and they see that there are often the same lapse of time in between the situation. So I'm not able to do this kind of work, but I know that this is at work. And when something is coming in my body, and less, it's quite miraculous, because I always hear, like everybody, when you age, it's become worse and worse. And I have the feeling I don't have pain in my body. It's rare, it's very, very, very rare. I can have pain if, for example, like last day, I walk maybe like 6 kilometers, and I was not too used to walk so much. I had to go to bed to sleep, and the day after, my knees, I was really at pain. Or if I do an exercise a little bit too much or too violent, sure, I have pain. But I don't have pain like I had some years ago in my joint, or maybe it's also because I'm more flexible with myself, more tender with myself. There is less, things that are like holding and stress inside. But about the scars, I'm going to give you an example. And it's not, I have one for me. I had, when I gave birth to my son, I had an episiotomy to cut, the perineum, to don't be pulled, to tear apart. And this scare was present to me for many, many years. And I could not say it was disturbing at another level, but it was really like itching and present, and until when I was in my 30s in Paris, I discovered this midwife, osteopath, and I told her, I think my body is okay, but I think there is something there, and she worked on the cell memory of this scar. And in fact, I never felt it anymore. So she could also see in my tissue if I had things violent, very deep, and she said, no, everything is in good place. She also told me that my uterus was inverted towards the front, something I didn't know, that nobody never told me, even the gynecologist. And she said that this also, my soul decided that my body will be like that. And I understood that in fact it was a protection, because it was very hard for me to keep the contraceptive pills. I could not, and even to have the spiral. But having this retroversion of the uterus, I was less prone to be pregnant. So it was a good information for me to know about this. And there is another story about scar, and this could have been really severe. It's from my mother. She had a surgery for a cyst on a surrenal, on a glandula. To do the surgery, they open in front, they pull the organs, and they go above the kidney, where the surrenal, to take off the cyst. It was a cyst of fat. They did, the surgery went well, and she was more or less my age. And I was in Paris, living in Paris at that time, and she went out of the hospital in Paris, and she went to visit her sister east of France, my aunt. with her husband, who was a little bit tyrant, like really, like it was hard at home, and my mother was under stress all the time like that, holding. And she came home in Paris to stay with me, and there she relaxed. Couple of days after, she was like fainting, cold and white. I said, what is going on? She said, I don't know, I feel bad, I feel I'm dying, I don't know what is going on, I have absolutely no energy, I'm going away. So immediately I called the naturopath I know, who is doing also acupuncture, Chinese medicine, and all these things. And I say, you know, this is what is happening, Dominique. Something is, he told me, bring her immediately. So I took a taxi, I brought my mother immediately. We were right there, he tested her, and she explained to her the surgery and thing. He tested the scar, and the scar was a problem. In fact, what happened, when she was stressed at home with my aunt and uncle, the scar was compressed, so nothing was flowing. But when she came at home, she was so relaxed. But everything was opening, and the flow, which normally would have been done without being cut and all, something was not flowing anymore, because when they cut, and this the surgeon cannot know, some maybe know, but a lot don't know, because maybe the surgeon is not doing Chinese medicine. So it doesn't know that this can affect the meridian. And it affected the meridian, and the scar was connected with this meridian. So he was able, he did at some point of acupuncture, he injected a special serum, but I cannot tell you what it is because I don't remember and I don't know. In 15 minutes, it was miraculous. I was seeing her with her color coming back, and it was done. And he explained to her, he recentered her for 1 hour in acupuncture and testing and all, and he explained to her how to take care. He explained to her what happened in her body, but not only the physical, but with the meridians, and also how to take care of the scar in consciousness every day, like being in touch with the scar, to release herself by massages with a special plant formula, the cell memory, the trauma that was linked that. So this is what is going on. If you don't have an holistic approach, a global approach of the entity we are, it's difficult to have really deep treatment that cure us at the origin of the phenomenon, of the disease. And now, the actual medicine, I don't say it's bad, we need it also sometimes, and one day I will speak about that as well. But we have to have in mind that there are all the other possibilities, and to, for example, you're going to see a doctor, they say you have to see the specialist, you have that, you have to do a surgery. Maybe it's a good thing to have 2 other advices, 2 other tests with other doctors, bioenergetician, kinesiologist, naturopath, who are doing this testing, to see if all this goes on the same direction. And even if you have to take regular medicinal drugs, these other medicine can help you to, by compensation, with soft approach, to minimize the second effect of the chemical drugs. By homeopathy, by plants, by acupuncture, they can help. You need this medicine, okay, your body needs it, you take it, but they can help to avoid the side effects. So it's good to work all together. There is nothing wrong, but it's really good to be able to have this consciousness, to be aware of these possibilities, to look for that, to check online, be curious. Be curious, you have something, go investigate, look for natural way to cure that or what, and try to find practitioners who did medicine, but who took an orientation in this other medicine. And like this, you have someone who has the base, like the naturopath I know, has the base of traditional medicine, but he did also all these different approach, and he combined all together. And like this, it's not going blindly on a cure that you write like to hundreds of other people. It's really personalized, because we are all different and we have all different experiences, and our diseases are connected to our history past or very past from ancestors through us, because the energy is still working through us, or the present history of something that is happening and that we cannot face because we are off center energetically. So this was long. I hope it's not too confusing and boring. For me, it's my fascination since ever to know how this body is working, and it's really, and every time I found exactly the therapist I needed. So this is it for today. I wish you a very good evening.